During the Baroque period, there were conventions for ceiling paintings. So these conventions dealt with many things, but three that are particular to the Baroque period were about 1, subject matter, 2, the inclusion of family crests, and 3, style. So in terms of subject matter, that was chosen based on the social status of the patron, the type of building, the function of the room, and the overhead location of the imagery. That location of the imagery was important because there tended to be an ideal point in the room from which to view the ceiling paintings. So artists would always consider where a viewer would enter the room, as well as the locations of windows, for example, as they painted. So that's point number 1. Point number 2, family crests. Something new in the Baroque period was the incorporation of family crests into the pictorial field of painting. So up until this point, usually family crests would appear kind of outside of the pictorial scene, perhaps in a crest or in a vault or in a crown. But during the Baroque period, they take centre stage. They are part of the image and they send strong messages about the status of the family. Number 3, style. In the Baroque period, we see this real move to illusionism and optical persuasion. There's a lot of creation of illusionistic domes and fake architecture that moves beyond a trompe-l'oeil, beyond a trick of the eye, to actually trying to persuade or trick the viewer on an intellectual level that the event they're looking at is taking place. So it's not just convincing illusionism, it's more this event is actually happening in front of you as you look at it. And we can see these 3 conventions in action in Pietro da Cortona's Allegory of Divine Providence and Barberini Power. This was painted between 1632 and 1639 for the Palazzo Barberini that was built in Rome during the second quarter of the 17th century for the family of the newly elected Pope, Urban VIII. This ceiling fresco is in the central public reception room of the Barberini Palace. So it's known as a reception room, a ceremonial hall, or it's also known as the Salone. This room and the palace, the Barberini Palace, was designed by Carlo Maderno with the assistance of Bernini and Borromini. So here we have one palace and we have four titans of Baroque architecture working together: Maderno, da Cortona, Bernini and Borromini. We're going to focus on this hall. This hall is huge and it has a really large uninterrupted ceiling vault. So this isn't the usual flat wooden ceiling with coffering. There's no windows interrupting the vault. There's no stucco. And what that means is that huge space allows for a large and elaborate ceiling painting. Pietro da Cortona took advantage of this and designed a very complex, coherent, centrally focused unit with 4 large but subordinate narrative panels along the sides, and they frame a single opening to the sky. The narratives here are not confined within the frames, but they spill out and they become part of the decoration of the vault itself. The illumination is not uniform. Cortona fills the whole field of vision with billowing contrasts that are created by light streaming down from a single source in the distant heavens. Here it's like the figures are not attached to the architecture, but they seem to have freed themselves and taken flight. They all are viewed from a single standpoint below, but they all participate in this single event taking place at the apex. The figures, if you look at them, they're not just noble and muscular. They seem almost to be inflated, blown up by some superhuman principle of vitality that incorporated the urgent and heroic message of which they are the inspired agents. And if we just look at the whole, we can see the space of the room. It erupts with turbulent masses of exuberant, cloud-born, free-floating figures who perform a breathtaking aerial drama against the background of a heavy architectural vault and open sky beyond. As I said, it's a very complex image, so I want to walk us through some of the iconography so that we can make sense of the function and meaning of this ceiling painting in context. So in the centre, that grandiose figure, that's Divine Providence. She's the heroine of the drama. She sits on a throne of clouds. Her head is radiating light. She points towards a chorus of floating maidens who carry aloft an emblem of the Pope's coat of arms, a flight of 3 enormous bees, the famous Barberini bees, as well as the crossed keys to heaven that Christ had given to St. Peter, the first pope, and the papal tiara poised for the coronation of Peter's latest successor, Pope Urban VIII. Below Divine Providence, we have Time and Saturn representing the present and the future. Immortality crowns the arms of Urban VIII, and faith, hope, and charity frame the coat of arms with the laurel branches as the 3 Barberini bees fly up the middle. Above, religion holds the keys, and the personification of Rome holds the papal tiara. This sends a very strong message. Urban and his family are chosen by God to assume the highest post in Christendom. That's what this image is saying. The miracle-working bee that transforms nectar into honey has always been a traditional symbol of divine providence. But what motivates here is giving a kind of inner vibrancy of meaning, because it alludes not just to divine providence, not just to Barberini family, but a story about what actually happened during the conclave of cardinals when Urban VIII was actually elected. So according to the story, when they were making the decision, the papal conclave, about who would be crowned the next pope, apparently a real swarm of bees actually flew into the Sistine Chapel where the conclave was happening. And of course, the outcome of every papal election, no matter how fraught with controversy, is supposed to be the expression of God's will. But the descent of a flight of bees at the election of a man whose own personal emblem was studded with bees seemed like a really powerful message from the heavens. And it was seen to be a real sign about this new era of spiritual and material well-being, with Urban VIII promising a period of peace, prosperity, and Christian virtue. Returning to the image, the short cove directly below the main scene shows the story of Minerva overthrowing the giants. Here, Minerva represents wisdom. which is a personification of the church in defence of ecclesiastical things. In the cove opposite Minerva, we get to see temporal government. Authority and abundance enter, while old men, children, and widows await their gifts. At the same time, Hercules casts out the harpies. This represents the chastisement of kings and is a message to secular rulers who seek hegemony at the expense of papal states and prosperity of its citizens. So where Minerva represents the church, this represents the secular side of the family. Hercules is the virtuous hero, symbolising the army of the Pope, while the harpies represent the jealousy of neighbouring princes who are kept at bay by Hercules. On the south side of the Salone, we see moral knowledge, holding a sacred text and a flaming urn, both indicative of the lofty knowledge that she seeks. She is lifted by divine assistance, with piety on the right. The south wing was for the cardinal, so this side sends an appropriately moral and religious message. On the right, we see gluttony, embodied in Bacchus, personifying the bad upbringing of youth. And on the left, lasciviousness as a reclining woman who tries to defend herself against chastity and the army of chaste cupids. On the north side, we see dignity, who represents rank of office. And on the right, peace closes the temple of Janus as Furor is bound by gentleness, both symbols of peace. On the left, Vulcan makes weapons at his forge, and this is symbolic of preparations for war. Together, the two scenes are showing the preparedness which is necessary for the defence of the provinces, even in peacetime. This depiction on the side of the secular wing indicates the importance of rational political leaders and shows that the Barberini will seek to maintain peace, but will be prepared to fight if necessary. These scenes symbolise a spiritual, temporal dualism within the papacy. The keys of knowledge, represented by Minerva, and moral knowledge refer to the Pope's authority in spiritual matters. The keys of power, represented by Hercules and dignity, allude to peace and prosperity that result from the assertive authority and military preparedness of the papacy in temporal affairs. Together, they send an impressive message about the power and leadership of the Pope. The four octagonal medallions at the corners of the fresco are scenes from Roman history depicting the cardinal virtues, and the animals below the medallions symbolise the same virtue. So we have like unicorn representing temperance, a lion representing fortitude, hippogriff representing justice, and a bear for prudence. Cortona designed the fresco so that the four categories of symbolic imagery, mythical figures, allegorical personifications and virtues, historical people, and bestiary animals, all occupy specific spaces in the pictorial system. So, mythological figures are placed beyond the illusionistic frame, outside of the real space of the room, because they're most distant from us. Then we've got the allegorical personifications and virtues that intervene in our space, showing that they're the most important. And the historical figures are part of the enframement, but they occupy a separate space in a different realm. Then the animals, because they're closest to humans, move in the Salone space. These spatial indications, whether they are within or beyond our space, give the viewer clues about those figures and the images depicted. So this The allegory of divine providence power evidences Baroque conventions for ceiling painting in its subject matter, because it reflects the social status of the Barberini family and the purpose of this ceremonial hall. It also evidences the Baroque convention of including the family crest, with the bees included in that pictorial field. And lastly, in the illusionistic style that both engages with the viewer's own world in the real space, but also travels in time and in space and from the earth to the heavens.